Hey there! This video is going to be a first impressions of the Nikon Z6 Mark III, which just shipped. I just got my hands on it and I went out to shoot with it last night. I want to give you my first impressions about this camera for shooting video. So before we get into it though, I just have to have a absolutely huge thank you to B&H Photo who lent me this camera to test, review, and make videos like this for all of you. They've been such a huge supporter of this channel and allowing me to get videos like this out for all of you. So if you're looking to pick up camera gear, go check out B&H Photo. There are links down in the description for the Z6 III and all the gear that I use on a regular basis. So huge thank you to B&H Photo. Okay, so I went out last night to shoot sunset because I just got the camera yesterday afternoon and I wanted to sort of give you my first impressions. And I am really excited about this camera for a bunch of reasons, but recently I did get to test out and review the Nikon Z8 and the Nikon ZF, which I've documented on this channel. So I have a lot of thoughts about this camera. Of course, I'm getting much more comfortable in the Nikon world. And all of the footage that you saw at the beginning of the video was all shot in NRAW in 24 frames per second in the high quality mode. And I was shooting with the kit lens, which is what I'm shooting with right now, the 24-70 f4. So I have a whole bunch of stuff I want to talk to you about with this camera, and there'll be a lot of future videos coming about the Z6 Mark III, but it's just about to start raining. So I'm going to head inside and talk to you more about this camera. All right, so there are a lot of things to talk about with this camera, but I'm not going to do a full run through the specifications because you can look those up, but I do want to highlight and talk about a few of the things that I think are really cool and unique about this camera and things that I'm excited about. First of all is the sensor. This camera has a 24.5 megapixel full frame partially stacked sensor. Now, I've never heard of a partially stacked sensor before this camera. I think it's really fascinating to me and really interesting, and I can't wait to dive in and do some more testing on this. I guess the point of it is it reduces the cost from having a fully stacked sensor and only part of the sensor is stacked, and this will help get quicker readout speeds from the sensor and reduce rolling shutter artifacts. Now, one of the coolest things about the Z6 III is the fact that it is a 6K camera, and some of my favorite cameras out there are things like the Red Komodo, the Blackmagic 6K cameras, including the 6K full frame, which is what I'm shooting at right now, the Canon R3, the Fuji X-H2S, etc. I really believe that 6K is kind of the sweet spot right now for video cameras out there. So it's really cool that this has a full frame 6K sensor. Now I want to talk about the codecs because one of the coolest things about this camera also is the fact that it has most of the same codecs and stuff that's in the Nikon Z8 and Z9. They're top of the line cameras. So we have internal recording, all these modes, NRAW, ProRes RAW, ProRes HQ, and H.265 10-bit. And there's actually some new H.265 modes that you don't see in those other cameras, which I cannot wait to dive into. Also, it still has that lower resolution full frame mode that's similar to the Z8 where you can record in RAW but not have the full resolution. So I'm curious about that too, and I reached out to Nikon for some clarification on that. You can shoot 6K 60 RAW in this camera. That's pretty crazy. And if you're shooting in ProRes RAW, you can shoot up to 6K 30. So NRAW, you can shoot up to 6K 60, full frame, no crop, super cool. It also does 4K 120 with a crop, and it also shoots 1080p 240. So in terms of specifications, codecs, frame rates, this thing's got so much going on for it. Now, I do want to talk about the ergonomics because I think that's a huge part of this camera. Now, I didn't love the ergonomics of the Z8. I felt like it was a little bit too chunky and clunky for me personally. This is me personally talking here. What I find about this camera is it feels just about perfect. And what I mean by that is it has a nice deep grip. It's really easy to hold. I find the buttons and dials feel nice and they're in the right place. The build quality feels nice. I think it feels well made. It feels solid. It's got a nice weight to it. And overall, I really like the ergonomics of this camera. I found that out shooting last night with the LCD and the EVF both worked great. I was able to utilize that. It also, has in-body stabilization. It has a big battery, so as you'd expect in a camera this price point, but this is their sort of full-size battery. So that's nice to see. I didn't shoot long enough to really test out the battery life, but I will. The other thing is it does take one CF Express B card and one SD card. I love CF Express B. It's my favorite media right now in terms of speed, reliability, and cost, and all that sort of stuff. In terms of the image quality, I was really impressed with the camera. I thought the image looked great, had amazing colors. It was very easy to grade, very similar to my experiences shooting with the Z8 and the ZF. I think it produces a really pleasing image and really beautiful colors. I think Nikon does a great job with that. Now, I do have a couple of questions and concerns, which I will dive into more deeply in future videos. First of which is the dynamic range. I think this camera could use a little bit more dynamic range just from looking at my images. I think there's some other cameras on the market that capture more dynamic range than this camera. But again, I'm gonna have to test that and check that out. I'm always wanting more dynamic range. The next thing to talk about is the low light performance. Now I shot everything last night at ISO 800, which is the base ISO in N-Log, shooting in, well, I shot in N-RAW. The other things to think about here would be rolling shutter. I do think it's gonna have pretty good performance because it does have a partially stacked sensor, like I was mentioning earlier. And the other thing, of course, I will test out overheating because this camera does not have a fan and does have a lot of horsepower inside. So I'm definitely gonna be curious about those things, and I will be testing those in future videos. Now, in terms of the competition with this camera, I think this is what makes this camera really interesting. So if we start looking at all the sort of full frame cameras in the $2,000 to $2,500 price range, keep in mind some of these cameras have been out for a little while now. First of which is the Canon R6 Mark II. Now this camera was selling for $2,500. It's been on sale for $2,000. The huge feature is the full frame 4K 60 in the R6 Mark II, but the R6 Mark II doesn't have internal RAW. It also doesn't have the best dynamic range in my opinion, and it doesn't shoot 4K 120. So a lot of advantages for the Z6 III over the R6 II. Now, the next one to talk about would be the Sony a7 IV, which I think is a very similar camera in a lot of ways. That one's priced at $2,500, so same as the Z6 III. Now in 4K 60, it has a crop, which is one of the biggest drawbacks for a lot of people. It doesn't do internal or external RAW. There's no 4K 120, but the a7 IV does have a lot of dynamic range, and I definitely would think that it has a lot more than this camera. Now the next one to talk about would be the S5 II or S5 IIX. Those are $2,000 to $2,200 depending on which one you have. They're often going on sale. Again, this one has crop 4K 60. It does not have internal RAW. You can't shoot external RAW, and it does not have 4K 120. So in terms of specs, the Z6 III offers quite a bit, and it's pretty competitive. So at launch, the Z6 III is selling for $2,500 or $3,100 with the kit lens. So it's interesting to me that this is a kit lens. I know I see that on some of the higher end cameras where they have more expensive kit lenses. This lens, from what I saw last night, was really pretty and did a really nice job. I haven't tested it beyond that, but this is a $1,000 lens, which they're, as I said, are coupling with the Z6 III only for additional $600. So this might be a good pickup if you're looking to just get started in the Nikon system. I really liked shooting with it. It was really nice. So I think this is a really cool release for Nikon and the industry as a whole, because it's great to see Nikon continue to push and get better with the video side of their cameras. I think a lot of people have been critical about Nikon, and people haven't really been giving them a lot of attention because they're really known for photography and they've been killing it in the photography world for decades. But they're starting to make more of a push in the video world, and you can definitely see this with their latest releases like the Z8, the Z9, and of course the Z6 Mark III, and also they're signaling the industry how serious they are about the video side of their cameras with the acquisition of Red. So this is, in my opinion, a very competitive camera. In a lot of ways, I think it might be one of the best options in its category. And I say might because I haven't fully tested out the camera yet, but in terms of the specs and what I've seen so far, this is a very competitive camera. Now, I can't wait to test out the camera more and see its strengths and weaknesses, and I will share that all with you guys on this channel. I also really look forward to future releases from Nikon, and I think this competition coming out of Nikon is really good because other companies will just be forced to make their products better, and obviously Nikon is pushing to make their products better. So hopefully you enjoyed this. If you want to see more content about the Nikon Z6 III and other cool stuff, please hit subscribe down below. I appreciate you watching. Thank you so much, and we'll see you in the next one.